Well, Loyd, we were talking before we got started. Why don't we pick up again with just talk a little bit about your family background and your father in Germany and what brought him to the United States and how you got here, how the family got here, and a little bit about your family tree.
Okay, so both my parents on each side, as far as they can trace back, are 100% German ancestry. As far back as they can trace, after World War II, they did not know each other in Germany. They were teenagers after World War II, but the country was devastated and the future looked bleak. Both of them decided they wanted to go someplace else and have a better future. They tried to come to the United States, but they were denied entry because they were Germans, and we just fought a war with Germany and lost lots of our own flesh and blood over there. The Americans, I understand that. And the United States did not accept them as immigrants. So they went to Canada, both individually now. They ended up in Toronto and somehow met, believe it or not, at a German club at a dance. And that's how they met, and they, got married. And after several years, my mother's health was deteriorating. Doctor said you need to go to, you need to go to a warmer climate. And by this time, the border had opened up for them, so they moved to Florida. I had heard something like my dad kind of ran out of gas in Tampa. That's as far south as he got. I don't know that that's true or not, but that's what the rumor has. So he just kind of ended up in Tampa, and he had photography skills in Germany. He was taught that in his youth.
How old was he when he migrated to
I believe he was 18 and my mother was 16. Now, she actually came with her parents. She didn't immigrate individually. She came with her parents. She came with her mother. Her father paid the way for her sister, and her mother, but did not have the fare himself. He stowed away on the ship. He literally did. He stowed away on the ship and ate the scraps that were thrown off the plates. He ate out of the garbage.
Goodness.
He did. He ate out of the garbage on his trip to Canada. But he was a stowaway. And so anyway, so my father had learned the photography skills, especially film processing skills, and sound. Getting sound on film. He had learned those skills in Germany. It was actually kind of a German invention. But when he came to Tampa, he got hired on at NBC Studios to work in the color lab to process film. So everything was done by real, true film at that time. Obviously, there was no, CDs or instantaneous digital. We know that. And my father had learned the skills in Germany to combine sound on color film. And that was not done in the United States. They did not have that technology, but he had learned it in Germany. So when he came to NBC Studios, he showed them how to do this process. So you used to have a sound track. It was an individual tape, and then you had a video track that was an individual tape, and you always had to combine the two. I don't know if you remember when you were younger, you went to movies, and sometimes the sound was not playing in line with the lips moving. You remember that? I do actually remember that. I've seen some movies that were like that, and what's happening is that they didn't have them cued exactly the same, so the sound was running slightly ahead or slightly behind the visual. So they could do it on black and white. They had it combined by the time my father came, but they couldn't do it on color. There was some technical problem there, but my father knew how to do it, so he did it for NBC Studios and actually got it patented for NBC Studios, and his name is in the U.S. Library of Congress as being credited with that invention, although it wasn't his invention. He learned it in Germany.
What was his name?
Leo Heinrich Fasselt.
Okay.
Fasselt,
Yeah.
which is an unusual name even in German.
Really?
It is a German name, but it is unusual. There's not many of them even in Germany. So, and there's none in America. There are none. We've checked the U.S. directory many times. I checked it like just 3 months back, and the only people on that directory are my family, my sister, and my aunt in New York. Literally, that's the only Fassels that will show up.
That's amazing.
So, but
How
anyway.
good was his English when he first came here?
So, in order to become a U.S. citizen at that time, my father had to learn conversational English. He had to deny his German background. He had to take an oath of allegiance to America, and he had to conscript to the military for 2 years. Now, my wife, his wife, sorry, my mother, Gisela Fasselt, actually was expecting her first child, my sister, at the time. And because of that, they didn't make him conscript to the military. But, oh yeah, and I'm sorry, they also had to pass a proficiency in U.S. history. So both my mother and father had to pass an English exam, a history exam, take oaths, deny their oaths deny their citizenship, had to rescind their citizenship in Germany. So you have to be in.
Rescind sounds a little bit better than
Yeah,
what you said
yeah,
before.
right. I mean, you're German, but you have to rescind your, any oath of loyalty you made to Germany. You have to rescind all that, And why not? You're living in this country. This is America. You need to be American, and that's how I grew up. So we spoke German in the house. We had the German customs. We kept the German foods. My environment was German. But my parents made it very clear. I know my mother for sure, absolutely, 100%. Talked to me. She says, we do all this in the household, and you think of yourself as German. She says, but you are American. You are in this country. This is the country that is feeding you, that's clothing you, that's giving you your home. He says, you are American. So do not think of yourself as German, even though you have all this German stuff around you. You are an American.
Sure. So you spoke German at home?
Yeah, mainly listened. I could speak if I wanted to, but it was difficult. They always spoke in German, so I heard it all my life long. But when I visited Germany, it just all came out. I mean, I understand the language. I can speak the language.
Yeah.
But anyway, so.
Yeah. Well, good skill to have.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Second language is always good.
Mm-hmm. But that also, I guess, it's an immigrant story in general of maintaining the culture at least for a generation or two.
Sure.
And yet, outside the home, it's different.
Yeah, it is, and it actually is conflicting, because in many ways I still to this day think and reason like a German. I carry all those German traits. I will not accept it until I'm convinced that it's right. I'm stubborn in my pursuit for what I want to do. The way I want to do it. I mean, all those things. The American culture is different, and a lot of times I am butting heads with my own culture, even though I was born and raised here.
Yeah.
Because there's that much German influence in my home.
Yeah, I've got some friends that speak Spanish at home, but perfect English outside.
Right, yeah, and my wife is also a immigrant. She immigrated from Havana, Cuba.
Tell me about her.
Carmen immigrated when she was 7. Her father got her out of Castro's Cuba. Castro had taken over 3 years earlier.
In '59, he took over.
Yeah, she's older than I. She came. Her father was smart enough to smell a rat in Castro. He understood what communism really was. He understood where Castro was taking the country, and he got the heck out while he could.
So about '61 they got here?
Yeah, she got here. Yeah, probably or 62. Yeah, probably right around that age. She was within the last year where Castro let anyone out. After that, he closed the border.
Well, the Kennedy administration, Bay of Pigs.
Yeah, right.
That's about that same
Yeah,
time.
but right. So she got out within the last year that anybody got out, and they were allowed to take essentially the clothes on their back. They weren't even all their jewelry, everything was confiscated at the airport. The rings, their wedding rings, everything, all their money, everything was taken from them. Even then. Castro was not a good guy. Right. But anyway, so they immigrated. And of course, they went to Miami. There's already a Cuban community in Miami at that time, so it was easier for them to transition.
Yeah.
And so.
Well, it sounds as though growing up, you were always interested in building and I guess the building skills and what have you.
So
your father was a photographer.
So my father was a professional photographer, but he was ambitious. My father was ambitious, And I'm not sure exactly what started him building, but he started remodeling houses on nights and weekends. I guess just picked the skills up by himself. When I was 11, my family embarked on building a weekend retreat house, kind of, a cottage, a second house, a vacation home, whatever you want to call it. So the whole family, literally, mother, father, sister, father, myself, built a home out in Withlacoochee, on the Withlacoochee River in Florida. And we literally, I did the framing, I did the roofing with my father, and I did the electric. My sister and my father did the plumbing. I can't remember. I guess my mother did a little bit of everything.
And you're 11 years old.
I was 11 years old. Yeah. And we literally built this house from scratch. And I just fell in love with the building trades. Oh my goodness, I just fell in love with it. And it's kind of it set the path for the rest of my life.
Do you know how unusual that was for an 11-year-old to be doing the framing and the electrical and all of that?
It seemed normal to me. My dad said we need to go do this, so we went out and did it.
You worked with your father on
Yeah,
this,
yeah. I worked with my father. Now, Dad had taught me carpentry skills when I was younger. I'd built birdhouses and things like that. I knew how to nail and measure and cut and all that. Since I was a little boy. But he had learned carpentry, I think, in school in Germany, as I recall. I think, in his grade school he had learned that. So, but anyway, I kind of knew right then and there that's what I wanted to do. I kind of built my life around that. I said, I'm going to build houses when I'm older. I'm going to build houses. So, so I went to high school. I took a trade school, Tampa Bay Tech, and I, 3 hours a day is dedicated to the trade of carpentry, my selected trade, and I got high school credits for that. And already in the second year, in my junior year, they allowed me to work outside for a company. I worked for a cabinet shop, and they were giving me high school credits for working at this cabinet shop. And I also took summer school and night school and got all my academic credits out of the way. So in the middle of my junior year, I had no more academic credits. I was working full time, and I would work one trade after another. I did cabinetry until I thought I had a handle on it and knew what was going on. Then I switched to framing. I worked on a framing crew in Florida building houses, and when I figured out, that I got all this down, as soon as I got a handle on what that trade was about, I switched and went to another job. Then I worked remodeling and high-rise construction, and that was completely different. And so.
So you mentioned the Criterion Corporation.
Yeah, Criterion Corporation was one of the largest builders in Florida at the time. So I was framing houses. I was one of the framing crews for that company. Yeah.
And so, let's see, if you're doing that at age 17, were you through high school at that time, or still taking, well, I guess you said you were actually working, though, for high school credit.
Right, I was working for high school credit. So in the middle of my junior year, I had no more academic credits. I had achieved all the academic credits necessary to graduate. Instead of 3 years, I did it in a year and a half. And then all I had to do was work to get the remaining credits that I needed to actually get a diploma. By the end of my junior year, in my senior year, I had no credits at all. I was done. I physically did not attend any class my senior year, and then graduated at the end of the year with my class. So I worked that whole year and made tons of money and learned a skill even better than what they could have taught me at the trade school, because I'm actually working in the field, literally doing it for a company trying to make money. So.
And so then you go into business for yourself?
Yes, sir. So my parents taught me a lot of wisdom growing up in Germany, hungry, sick, not in good condition. They knew how to be frugal. They knew how to be miser. They knew good economics, and they taught me good economics my whole life long. And my parents had always.
It had to be terrible for them growing up during World War II in Germany.
Oh, it was.
The bombing
of all
the cities.
It was. Yeah. They were essentially denied their childhood. My parents didn't have a childhood. They were surviving for most of their childhood, their growing up years, And there's tons of stories and tons of memories there, and a lot of them are very bad. And we won't go into them, now it's not part of this, but
Yeah.
but they grew up hard, so they grew up serious. You know, they hit the ground running. You know, they hit Canada and America. They were serious about things.
Yeah.
So they taught us that way too. My daughter, my sister, and I were taught, you know, frugal economics. And one of the things they always taught me, they said, you know, you need to invest your money. You need to be buying land. You need to buy land, and then you need to get houses, and you need to go into rental business, and you need. My parents taught me all that as a kid. I had bought my first property at 17, I think, for cash, my money, not their money, my money, cash. I bought my first property at 17.
Because you'd been working.
So I had been working. Yep.
Already.
I bought my first property at 17. When I graduated from high school, I took 2 months off. I backpacked Europe alone in all those countries that I don't speak languages. You know, you're so afraid of that. You know, you think, how am I going to go through Sweden and Italy and France? How am I going to do this? I don't speak a word of these languages. And I'm going to go do it, put my backpack on, and I went out and did it.
So
It
this
was,
would be late 70s by this time, I guess.
yeah, actually, I think it was 80, I think, as my
1980.
memory serves. I think this was 80. So anyway, so I took the summer off, backpacked Europe, came home, and started building houses for myself. I borrowed $20,000 from my grandmother. She had the money, praise the Lord. I borrowed 20 grand from my grandmother. I had the lot, and I built my first house. Started at 18, finished it at 19. It took me a whole year to build it, year plus. And you know, I did as much of it as I could myself, saved money everywhere I could, you know, built it under a homeowner's permit, and then actually rented it to a friend of mine, rented it, and then, you know, sold it after, you know, just a little bit, sold it, and then built another, you know. So I love home building. But I love spec home building. And you know, where I'm building under my control and I get a finished product, then I put it up for sale. I really don't have the nerves to deal with homeowners. Like if I were taking a homeowner's money and trying to build their house their way, oh, that's all my friends that have done that. That can be disastrous, you know.
They're always changing.
They are always changing, and they don't like it, and then it's too slow, and you know, it just goes on and on and on. So the city of Tampa ran out of sewer in the mid-'80s. They didn't have capacity anymore. You couldn't get permits to build new houses. You can get permits for remodeling and addition, and I did that. So I did remodeling and additions, but I really didn't like that work. I only liked the spec building work, and that's kind of what led me.
Oh, I was just going to say running out of sewer capacity because, well, it's right on the ocean for one thing, I guess. And,
It's on the bay, yeah.
and so I guess underground water sources, or what's the problem?
No. They just didn't plan it right. So you have too much building, and your sewer capacity can't keep up to take new homes, new people coming into the area. So you have to build more sewer treatment plants.
So they needed the building officials to plan ahead.
They needed a sewer and water director to plan ahead for the influx of immigrants people moving to Tampa that were, so they didn't plan that right. And it happens. Tampa's not the only one. Many cities have run out of capacity and had to have moratoriums on new houses until they can catch up. It's hard to plan because you don't want to spend money for something that doesn't happen.
Right.
But you can't. But because it takes 3 years to get a new treatment plant up and running, you can't do it at the last minute either. So it's always this balance,
Yeah.
So.
Okay, so Tampa runs out of sewer capacity.
Yeah. So I stopped building new houses, and I do remodeling addition for other people, for friends, not on my own. And a friend of mine that used to hang drywall for me, I met him at the state fair one time, and I'm like, hey, so what's going on? How you doing? He says, oh, let me tell you. He says, I quit hanging drywall. He says, I became a building inspector. He says, I went to work for the city. He says, this is the best job I ever had, and that brought it into my mind. It's like, well, wait a minute, I used to think building inspectors were, if you weren't successful in building, then you became a building inspector, right?
Well, I was going to say, I thought it was a little strange that you're such an entrepreneur that you would go to work for government instead of continuing your capitalist enterprises.
So now I'm married with one child.
Okay.
and things are looking a little differently. Construction is always this roller coaster, right? It's always going up and down,
You
you
want
know,
a steady
feast or
income.
famine. And once I got the child, it's like, you know, I need insurance, I need meals, I need rent
yeah.
the whole time. I can't wing it. I'm not backpacking Europe anymore. I'm not flying by the seat of my pants. I need some stability here. So I took him up at that, and I went out and I got a couple certifications. You know, there's 25 or something in the building industry. You know, I got my commercial building and my commercial electrical certification. You know, researched what I needed to do, bought the books, took the exam, did all that before I even applied anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I applied at Tampa, I applied at DeKalb, and I applied at Gwinnett County, because those DeKalb and Gwinnett County were the best counties at the time in Georgia. You know. And I interviewed for them all, and Tampa didn't hire me. DeKalb County said he'd love to hire me, but I guess he already had somebody else. But he said, you need to go to Gwinnett, and that's how I ended up at Gwinnett, and Gwinnett hired me. So that's how I ended up there. And then I stayed there only a year and a half, and I had a offer in a smaller city. The problem with Gwinnett County was they had like 58 inspectors or something when I was there, and you were kind of just lost in the pool. And the people who were rising up there at that time were people who were the local good old boys who knew people in the government, you know, and I saw this going on, and I'm like, okay, this isn't going to be me, you know. So offer came here where I would be, you know, essentially doing everything, and I took the job here.
So this is when, 96?
This is 96, yes, sir.
Okay.
So
You got an offer from Ackworth?
yeah, they had an opening, and I applied,
Okay.
and then I got an offer. And the first offer was ridiculous. They were giving me $25,000 in addition to, you know, building inspector, plans examiner. They wanted me to be the DDA director at the same time, and I'm like, I'm not doing that for $25,000. You know, I mean, I make more than that now. I was making like 26 at Gwinnett or something. Like, you're crazy. I'm not going to do this. 6 months later, or 4 or 5 months later, or whatever, they called me and they said, hey, we'll give you just the building inspector position for 30. And I said, okay, you're on.
Who was mayor at that time?
Bill Gibson, God
Yeah,
rest
yeah,
his soul.
yeah.
Yep, Bill Gibson. Nice man, very nice man.
And was Brian Bodius here by that
No,
time?
he was not. He was not. At that time, the city was operating with the department heads, and the mayor operated the city. There was no city manager at the time.
Oh,
Yeah, they had just gotten rid of their last city manager. Oh my gosh, I can almost remember her name. Begins with an A. I'm sorry. But anyway, they just gotten rid of her. But so when I came on board, there was no city manager.
okay. So 96 you got here, and I think you had a story about somebody taking you all around the city and showing you all
Well,
where all the housing was.
Actually, if I may segue
Sure.
just a little bit. So I had taken the offer and resigned at Gwinnett County, you know, given my notice at Gwinnett
yeah,
County.
there is a story. I know where you're going with this.
And you know, Gwinnett County is the most progressive county in Georgia. They have a wonderful inspections team. I mean, they really do. Wonderful plans examiner, all architects and engineers. They're just top of the top. And Ackworth had several scandals in the last year before that, you know, and Ackworth was a small, you know, up-and-coming metro Atlanta town, and I started to second-guess myself just a little bit. I'm like, boy, you're going from first to maybe worst, you know. It's like, are you
Yeah.
sure you want to do this, Loyd? Is this the right thing to do?
What was Ackworth, about 10,000 people at that
No,
time?
no, it was between 6 and 8. I heard two different terms thrown out at me when I
Pretty
came
small
there, but
town.
it was a small town. But anyway, so but I went ahead and took the job, and I was going to be moving in May, and my wife had always she had always gone to see her father in Miami. Her father was still alive, living in Miami. She always went to see him in May and September, and she already had this trip planned. This was her, you know, annual May trip to see her father, and she says, "Oh, but Loyd, you're taking a new job. You're going to be moving during that time." She says, "I better cancel my flight. You know, I better cancel this trip to Miami." And I totally did everything I could to convince her that no, don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. I can start my new job. I can move. It's not a problem. Would you please go see your father? But she did not. And it turns out that she was scheduled to take the return flight from Miami on ValueJet 592, which crashed in the Everglades. And it's unbelievable to think that had I not taken this job in Ackworth, my family would have died on that flight. She was expecting again with her now with her second daughter, so you would have had Erica and expectant with Rachel at the time. I would have lost all three on the way to the Everglades, on the way back. But
so the family comes to Ackworth, and there's a story, I think, about how you found a place to live.
Okay, so yeah, we came here. Now, we didn't have a lot of money, obviously. I tried to do the traditional family path. I didn't want my wife to have to work, at least not when our children were young. I wanted her to take care of the family. And so, we're limited income. Government doesn't typically pay that much. Everybody knows that, but one of the only places the only place I could afford, I had to someone had given notice at this complex that they were leaving, and I had to sign the lease without ever even seeing the unit. It's like if you wait for this to come open, it's going to be taken by somebody. You need to secure it now. So my wife and I, actually rented the apartment without ever even seeing it. It was a duplex up on Logan Road. In later years, we ended up that unit came for sale, and I bought it. And that was another story too, because we were looking to own something. I didn't want to rent. That's not a frugal thing. I don't want to rent from somebody. So we're looking to buy, but I couldn't afford anything in Ackworth. So we were actually literally looking at buying mobile homes out on Glade Road, up on Red Top Mountain over there.
Yeah.
When the owner of the duplex says, "Oh, I'm going to sell this. You want to buy this?" I'm like, "Oh, you got it. I'm going to buy this," because the rent from the other side would allow me to afford the mortgage. So that made all the difference in the world there.
Yeah. Well, you got a tour around the city once you.
Okay, so yeah, one of the first things, the first year I worked there, Public Works Director and I were tasked by then City Manager Brian Boltice, and then we had a City Manager. So our City of Ackworth map needed to be updated, and they needed someone who would know the city. And they figured the Public Works Director is around, dealing with all the street problems and, infrastructure problems. They figured the building inspectors are around dealing with everything. So that, let's task these two with updating the map. So we literally drove every foot of every street in this entire city, and we noted every little imperfection as we went on the map, where they had streets misaligned, or the street went up too far. Oh no, it starts back here. I mean, we spent all day long going up and down every street in Ackworth, making note of all the discrepancies on the plan. And that was a wonderful experience. It was wonderful to really get to know the city. I mean, I know the city inside out, like the back of your hand, like the cliche goes. I really do, and that started me off on that. And the experience with Joe Griffiths, he was so funny. I mean, we were laughing and cutting up as we were doing this. It was just a wonderful day.
Yeah.
God rest his soul. He's passed.
Joe Griffiths?
Joe Griffiths, yeah, he's passed.
Well, and I guess you learned a lot about the city, including places where there were mobile homes that were hidden.
Yeah, thank you. So while we were doing this, we were also instructed to count the number of mobile homes in the city. And my gosh, everybody knew the common ones that you could drive around these back roads and you could see them. But when we were doing this survey, we found a ton of them that I never knew existed. I mean, double what we knew existed. And they're out behind people's houses. They're tucked away in the woods. There's even one in town that has a house facade. It's still there. I don't want to be quiet about it. It has a house facade, and behind it is a mobile home. It looks like a house from the street, but it's a mobile home. We found a bunch up at the flea market out on Cobb Parkway out on 41. You would never think. You go back behind all the flea market buildings and go towards the woods on the left side. There were like 13 of them in a row back out in there that Pete Henson actually used to rent them out, use them as rentals. But
Wow.
But anyway.
Well, when you came here, your job was building plans, examiner, slash inspector.
Yeah, that was my first position for like the first 2 years. There was a building official himself, Billy Cawthron, who was here ahead of me, and he ended up getting kidney cancer, and like just from within a 2-week period, he was gone. He just never. I mean, he recovered, but I'm saying he was gone from work. He just he quit. So Brian assigned me to the building official's position, and I had all my certifications at that time. I qualified, so I took the role as building official. So.
And how big was the staff at that time, the office?
So Billy and I ran it together, just the two of us at that time. When I took over as building official, I saw the writing on the wall. I saw what was happening with the city. We're subdivisions coming that have 200 and 300 homes in them. I'm like, I can't do this. I need 2 people. You're going to have to give me, if you want me to be building official, I need 2 inspectors. So the city allowed me to get a second inspector at that time. So when I transitioned, I hired 2 more inspectors.
Okay. How big is the department now?
It's the same. It's the same. We have made. Now there were times, I can tell you, between 2000 and probably 2015, I really needed a third person, but I'm being so frugal. I'm running the city as if I would run my own household, and I'm like, so we need a person now, but when this slows down, there's not going to be enough for 3 people. So I didn't want to hire somebody, but I really should have, because I wore myself and my people out, and I actually had a lot of people transition in and out. It was just too much work. I should have hired the third one at that time.
What was your impression of Ackworth in '96?
I liked the family atmosphere. Ackworth was Mayberry. Oh my gosh, and I've tried to keep that atmosphere that I liked so much. Ackworth was really, everybody knew, just kind of knew. You had institutional knowledge of what was going on. I remember, part of what we did too, we actually at one point in time, we had business licenses under us, and I would find where records were missing, and I'm like, hey, Joe's or so-and-so doesn't have a business license, and the treasurer would say, oh yeah, no, he paid that, I just didn't send you the, it was all done, so much of it was done just by, oh no, he's good, don't worry about him, but the town was really Mayberry-ish, and I like that feel. I think that's good. So I think you can marry the two. I think you can marry a professional, do your job, be top rate, and still keep that Mayberry feel. Still treat people like they're your neighbor or your friend, And I think there's enough department heads within the city that have that same vision. I know the mayor has that same vision, and it's kind of kept this town Mayberry. You see how beautiful the town is and everything that the city has done, all the good planning and all the infrastructure that's been put in, but it's still a hometown friendly atmosphere. You can still talk to a live person and get a smile, and somebody that's going to help, somebody that wants to help you, not like, oh my gosh, I've got to deal with you because it's my job. It's like, no, here, come on, I'll help you. That's the atmosphere of this town.
Well, what was the downtown like in '96?
Thank you for asking. There's probably only 2 or 3 businesses in all of downtown were active. I mean, they were all closed up and not doing anything. And the city manager asked me, he said, Loyd, before anybody else moves in here, I want those buildings to meet code before you bring anybody else in. And I thought to myself, you are crazy. You only have 3 people downtown. You want to run them off too, You want me to put a higher standard still? But he was smart. He was very smart. He saw actually that by forcing people to go to a higher standard, you would attract more businesses. If you would clean this up, make people, paint their facades and fix their rotten wood, and tuck joint the bricks and all that, if you would force people to make their buildings meet code, it would be a more attractive environment for more people to come. And obviously you see we have a wonderful downtown today.
Yeah.
Not just because of that effort, but that was part of it. That's what started it. So.
Let's see, was it Gibson was mayor when you got here?
Yes.
And then Marcia Andruzzi comes
Correct, yeah.
And then Tommy Allgood's been here for ages now.
That's right. So, Yeah, the only three mayors that have been here in the 26 years I've been here were those three.
Mhm.
Yep.
Why don't you talk a little bit about maybe the way city government works a little bit more, and Brandville, Tyson, Mayor Allgood, and so on, and what is there a philosophy that drives Ackworth government, do you think? Particularly in terms of building official and, businesses come and say, we want to put in a subdivision or whatever, and you have to work with them, or people that want to renovate an area.
So this is a very unique job. Anything having to do with enforcement, be that police or be that civil law or be that building official, there's always a dichotomy going on. People hire you and put you in this position because they recognize the value you bring to the table in making sure that everything new is built to a good standard that will last and perform and be uniform and not cause safety issues and fire issues, etc. But by the same token, when you go out and you do these things, let me put it to you this way. There's nothing that I do that doesn't make people do what they don't want to do, tell them they can't do what they want to do, but in either case it's going to take you more time and more money. So there's nothing that I do that really makes people happy on the going in whatever I deal with you is painful in that sense. So there's it's always it's a really unique situation where the more stringent, the more conscientious you do your job, the more you aggravate the people who hired you to do it. It's one of those weird, aggravate in the sense of, it's a reality that you still want to hold costs down as much as you can, so when I go in there, I'm actually raising the costs, so that doesn't go well with the building community. It's actually what the city's hired me to do in a sense, to enforce code, but that costs. There's a cost involved in that. So it's a hard job in that sense. You're not making people happy, including your bosses. They're always, do we have to do that? And then I got to explain, yes, you have to do that. This is why code says you have to do this, and okay. So it's kind of a funny relationship building officials have.
So you don't win popularity.
No, you most certainly do not. And on top of that is that that I'm only seen when something goes wrong. So again, we call it the submarine service. It's almost like you don't even know we're here unless something goes wrong. And something goes wrong, it's like, oh well, Loyd, why didn't you catch that? But all the things that go right is never going to be seen. Homeowners don't see that. That they don't realize what effort has been put in to protect them, and to protect their largest investment, but it's a necessary job, but it's.
Well, do builders ever come to you ahead of time and say, let's talk about what we're doing?
Yeah, sometimes they do, and then I can give them the bad news for their planning. Which is cheaper and easier on them than just doing it and telling, my having to come back and tell them, oh, now you have to redo it. So yeah, some of them do, and some of them have learned through the decades. Some of them have learned that really I'm actually on their side. I want you to make money, and I really do. I want you to be successful. I'm going to help you be successful. I have a total different philosophy than I think most building departments do. When you come into my counter, I'm going to partner with you. I'm going to partner with you to make you successful. I'll do everything I can, but I have the code that I have to enforce. I'm bound to enforce this code. So a lot of what I give you is not good news in your ears, but I'll show you the quickest and easiest way to accomplish it.
Right. So if they're smart, they come and work with you from day one.
100%. If they're smart, they do. And a lot of the old timers have finally learned that, look, I really am in their corner, and then they'll ask my opinion. Hey, Loyd, what's the easiest way to do this? What's the cheapest way to do that? You know, when can I get around this? You know, and I give them the information and help them. You know, I wish more people would come for the planning stage instead of waiting till they've already got it set in stone.
Yeah. Does it
Yeah.
ever end up in court?
It can, but I do my very best to keep myself out of, and others out of court. And for the most part, I'm successful. I've probably forced maybe 9, 10, 12 cases in my life through court. Most of it I can avoid it. I can convince people to do the right thing without having to force them through the legal system, through the judicial system. I think if you're willing to go the little extra mile, you can avoid the court. You just talk to people like human beings and say, look, this is what you want, this is what I want. How can we make this happen together? And most people are reasonable. They don't want to go to court either. So, you know, like, okay, I understand. You know.
How did you meet Abby Parks? Did she come to you with a complaint about something with regard to historic preservation?
Well, probably. She came to educate me about historic preservation.
Okay.
You know, she sat me down several times and we had hour-long conversations about and thank goodness she did, because I would have never looked at my housing stock through that lens if it had not been for Abby. You know,
that's one of the big draws of Ackworth is its historic.
Correct. 100%,
site.
and we want to keep it going that way, and we've made good efforts to keep it going that way. So no, Abby came to me early on and explained what, you know, and she can be forceful or whatever. This is what I need you to do, you know, but I wasn't listening to that. I was listening to why I needed to do it, and she gave a great explanation on, you know, everything that historic preservationists look for and what we're trying to do, and you know, so yeah, I appreciate her. I appreciate her a lot. You know.
She hadn't been in Ackworth a long time before you got here.
No, but she was here before me.
Has a beautiful house.
Yes, yeah, it's a McMillan house. I think there were 5 or 7, I can't remember, McMillan houses in Ackworth.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
And the whole Collins Avenue historic area.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, that house wasn't actually there. That house was moved. Yeah, that house was moved.
Distance.
Yeah, moved for the Highway 92.
Yeah. So, you had a story about a certain bricklayer.
Oh,
You want to talk about that?
well, this is, you know, this story has lots of applications, including just a philosophical one even. You know, don't give up on people. So there is one of our larger contractors in Ackworth that built a substantial amount of Ackworth. In all his life up until his 40s, he was a violent alcoholic, and he was a bricklayer. And something happened in his 40s where he had a come to Jesus moment. Got sober, turned his life around, took a partner, and went out and started building houses.
He didn't build houses.
He didn't build houses before. He was in the construction trades, but you know, he took a partner and they started building houses. He became phenomenally successful. And a lot of people in here know him. That's why I'm not saying his name. A lot of people who are going to see me know him. And I think part of his life is private and needs to stay private, not associated with his name. But this gentleman who is in this community, he is now passed, God rest his soul, but still a lot of people know this man. You would not know his past if you knew who he was today. You know, the people that met him today, he's gentle, he tries to help people, he's easygoing. You would just not conceive that he was a violent, rampaging drunk most of his life.
Did you know him when he was
I didn't know him during those years, but all the old timers tell me how he was. Okay, And he himself even admitted, you know, I mean, even says he doesn't even know why his wife stayed with him. You know, he'll even say, I don't know why my wife stayed. I wouldn't have. He says I wouldn't have stayed with her if she was like me. You know, so today he's totally turned his life around and is a multimillionaire. And it just goes to show, I mean, at no stage in your life are you unredeemable, you know, from an economic standpoint, from a character standpoint, you know, you can always turn your life around.
Well, I think I've gone through most of the questions that I had. What would you like to talk about with regard to Ackworth, and what would you like people to know about Ackworth?
So Ackworth has always had this Mayberry feel, like I explained, and I think a lot of it has to do with there's enough people in enough high places in Ackworth that still really want the family-friendly environment, that want to deal with you like a neighbor, like I said, you know, not at a standoffish position, you know, you against me or whatever. That you come to different departments and that they'll really help you out with whatever they need to do. I know our power department is wonderful. I mean, they'll go out and fix things inside people's houses. Has nothing to do with but they're there, and the little old lady needs it, and they see it, and they'll go, oh well, we'll get you something, we'll make this work for you. And our public works department, you know, oh yeah, I can put in a pipe and we can give you some gravel, and then you can put your sidewalk across the ditch, and you won't have to, you know, we'll help you out with this. And they're not obligated to do that. They just do that. It's just being good neighbors, you know. I think that makes this city unique, and we've had good planners. I've had hats off to Tommy Elligood and Brian Bultice for having vision and seeing and believing that they could do it. I mean, there were lots of things they could do, road realignment that they did, you know. I mean, things I would never have thought they would do. You know, changing our interstate accesses, getting all these 1,000 parking spaces in downtown, a pedestrian bridge across the railroad tracks. I mean, you know, turning an old subdivision, Mitchell Hill, making it connect into our park system, creating a 130-acre park downtown. I mean, there's a lot of vision and a lot of planning and a lot of good execution that our leaders have done to really make this city a great place to live. And it shows. It's really attractive. Ackworth is hot. You know, Ackworth is hot. When I came here, like I said, it was 8,000 people, and it's just a tiny little town essentially from the lake back here. You know, Cobb Parkway was woods. I mean, there was virtually nothing on Cobb Parkway. A couple flea markets and a golf driving range. The Kroger shopping center had just recently been built when I came here, and so you go out on Nance Road where the Kroger shopping center is in Cobb Parkway. You know, there's a traffic light there now. Used to be a two-way stop sign, only in the direction from Nance. Going on Cobb Parkway, you never stopped at all. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like I say, every bit of that was woods when I came here. We built all of it in my jurisdiction, in my time here. And I was fortunate, God placed maybe, to be here at that time. I was fortunate to have this opportunity.
So you never had any temptation to go to a bigger city or anything?
Yes, and from a sheer career path, that would have been smart. And I knew it, and I had the opportunities, but here's why I didn't. So I had started, the duplex was my first rental property. Where I started with the other side. And since then, I've gathered a couple others that I have under my belt. I have 5 units totally at this time. If it were not for my rental units, I would have left. Because I could have gotten more money, could have gotten, higher pay and position. And, you take what you learn in your first few jobs and you apply it in a better way. You kind of get a restart. You get to apply it in a better way. It would have been smart career path for me to move, but because of this secondary income I had from my rentals, I never left, because it's too hard to reestablish those. So I moved to another jurisdiction. I'm cutting my pay substantially because I don't have these rentals, and it takes years to collect them and a lot of hard work and all that. I didn't want to go back and regather my portfolio, so I stayed for the real estate. Well, not that Ackworth, wasn't a good place to live, but I mean, it would have been smart for me to move.
So I'm sure all your rentals are up to code.
You got that right. I have good quality. I have good quality products. Yep, I sure do.
Have you ever been tempted to go back to building houses?
Yeah, I have. Just takes money and time. That much time I don't have. Well, I mean, the building official's job is hard to do within the 40 hours a week. I mean, I'm usually working a little bit late at night, you know, to write that last report, get that last memo out or whatever. So I don't have time to build now, but.
So you spent approximately 60 years between I-75 and.
Oh, okay.
And what, the US 41, I guess?
Yeah, so it's a little funny story. It's kind of strange. One day I'm here in Ackworth, and I'm telling myself, you know, look, I'm between 75. I live between 75 and Highway 41, and I'm thinking, well, let's see, you know, where I grew up in Tampa. Well, I lived a little bit further from 75, but I lived a block and a half away from 41. 75 was on the other side of 41 there. And I thought, but then, you know, I moved 2 or 3 times. I'm thinking, but every time I lived between 75 and Highway 41. And now here I am, you know, in another state, and I'm living between 70. It's like, with the exception of a few years of my life, I lived my entire life within a block and a half of Main Street. Main Street, Ackworth. Everywhere I lived, even down in Tampa, because it's the same road. You know, it's the old Dixie Highway. It used to go down to Miami. You know, still does, actually, but, you know, so I guess I have a connection of both 75 and Highway 41. Now, 75 wasn't built until I was 8 years old in Tampa, but still, you know.
Want to say anything about your wife or your children or whatever as we end up today?
Well, I think Ackworth has been great for all of them. Nice little town, just the right blend of town and country, you might say. They all grew up here. 2 of my children were, you know, born since I've been in this position. And yeah, I mean, I love my family. I never did ask my wife to work. You know, she's been taking care of our kids her whole life. We actually ended up homeschooling. So really? Yeah, we homeschooled all 3 of our children the entire way, all the way from 1st grade all the way through 12th. They were all homeschooled. Never stepped, except for one of them. 2 of our children have never stepped foot on a public school ground. Wow. Can you imagine they'd never been to a public school ground? Can you imagine that? It's hard to imagine, but that's the truth. You know, so it's kind of odd, but anyway, yeah, I have great children, great wife. You know, hey, living with a German builds character, so my wife has character.
Well, I'm out of questions. Unless you have anything you want to add, we'll close it at this point.
Well, so not making this whole interview about me, you know, there are some, you know, unique things about Ackworth. A lot of people may not remember and may not even know, but so we had we had 2 flea markets. We had the Great American and the Ackworth Flea Market, and they were across the street from each other. Great American Flea Market was where Home Depot is now, and both of those were such dumps. Oh my goodness, code violations everywhere in plain sight. I mean, I don't know how they ever got built that way. I mean, it's like nobody looked at anything back in those days, I guess. I mean, dangerous, you know, I tried to avoid going out there anytime because it's like, oh, I don't see that. Oh my gosh, you know, it's like, you know.
Yeah, I remember visiting them a time or 2.
Yeah, well, that's the way things were done at that day. So across the street was the Ackworth Flea Market. Pete Henson owned that, an old country boy, and he was an entrepreneur too. What he was doing was he had that fell off the road. You know how Coles is? You get on Car Park when you see how deep Coles is. You know, it just falls off the road, and so it did where that flea market was, which is now Lakeside Marketplace, where the Target shopping center and all that is built back in there. So he was filling that up. He was charging people to dump there. So he used that as a landfill. Then he'd concrete over top of it and build himself a flea market building. And then he'd let people dump. He'd build it up, concrete it over, and put another flea market.
Like a brownfield.
Yeah, it is a brownfield. It is a brownfield. So when they wanted to redevelop that, and I know Pete Henson, oh my gosh, God bless him. I mean, he's died too since then. But I mean, I know Pete, Pete wouldn't turn down anything for a buck. So who knows what is buried underneath there? I mean, I used to joke to people. I said, man, the missing suitcase of plutonium from Russia is probably out sitting out there. So I actually, when they wanted to redevelop that site and turn it into the Lakeside Marketplace, I knew what was going on there. I literally made them actually test for radiation because I really did not put it past Pete. I said, man, anything could be here. I said, I'm not going to put people in harm's way. If there's anything radioactive there, I said, it needs to be uncovered and dealt with, So they literally rolled the whole site. I have the geological report or whatever, so they didn't find any radioactive material down in there, but who knows what's down there. But that landfill, even when it was a flea market, if you went to the very back side of the landfill, it was on fire. You didn't know that. It was on fire underground. It was burning underground. You could see the smoke plumes coming off the back hill there. There were little jets of smoke coming out. Looked like like a volcano or something, But so we had to deal with that. And that was part of the whole reclaiming of that brownfield area. We had to put a very compacted earthen cap along the whole back side and top in theory, to smother it from oxygen, to put the fires out underground. And after months and months, it actually worked. The fires actually stopped, but it was burning when they started building out there. The Target, you walk in on Target, you sit in the parking lot and you walk in on Target, you don't realize that Target is not sitting on ground. That Target is suspended in the air.
Wow.
It is. It's driven on 55-foot pilings down to hard earth, and it is suspended on the air. There's no ground underneath that slab. I had a plumber doing illegal work. The plumber went out there to fix a drain line, and he cut the floor, and the floor fell away from him, and literally, because it is not sitting on the ground. Now it's not far; it's maybe a foot now. So the ground was used just as a formwork, and because it's a landfill, bacteria is constantly eating all of the decomposing material below and making voids. So the land is sinking away from the building. Okay, but it was planned that way. It was designed that way. This is an accident. We knew this was going to happen. But anyway, that slab fell off, and he's like, oh boy. He says, I don't know what the heck I've got here. He calls me on the phone. He says, listen, I'm sorry I was doing unpermitted work, but I don't know what the heck I'm dealing with up here. I said, you're over at the Target? He goes, yeah. I said, man, you shouldn't have never done that. It was a big, expensive repair. But anyway, so Target's sitting up on, it's actually sitting up on stilts, if you want. The whole building is, and the parking lot keeps sinking away from it. They have to go out there and they regrind and they regrade and they make that transition smooth between the parking lot and the building. You don't realize it, but it's all falling away from the building.
Sounds like a good scientific project to see what percentage of people that work out there come down with cancer or something else.
Yeah, well, okay, so there's a ventilation system underneath all the slabs that gather all the gases and take them through the roof.
Oh, really?
Yes, there is, and it's monitored, and I get quarterly reports on that, and I monitor the quarterly reports to make sure that there aren't hazardous gases coming out of the vents. Now, assuming that, so the whole thing is also built like a swimming pool in a sense. I mean, everything underneath the slab has a very thick rubber coating to keep the gases from penetrating through the slabs, and they're all directed to this pipe system. They infiltrate the pipe and then are exhausted through at the roof height, so they don't cause problems to people. So this is perfect. I'm glad you asked that question. So this is kind of the things that a building official would do that you don't see, that you don't know that's going on.
Just to keep up with the Target.
Yeah, well, that'll go on for who knows what. That might go on forever, the monitoring of these gases. So we monitor these gases to make sure that the system is still working and to make sure that the gases aren't increasing, because if they're increasing, I may have another fire started or something else going on in there. And to make sure that they're not changing. If the gas compositions change, then we have something else going on down there. But anyway, yeah, that's all monitored. Yeah, you got to make people safe. There is so much to a building that you never think about. When you walk into a commercial building, there is so much planning. There's so many safety regs that go into that. You just never conceive. There's just a lot that goes into it, a lot more than what people see. We manage the floodplains within the city of
Oh, you
Ackworth.
do?
Yes, sir, we do, and somebody's got to do that. And you'd be surprised how many jurisdictions, even to this day, really do not have a handle on their flood zones. I mean, they're putting buildings in places they should never be in, and it doesn't matter that the water never came that high in 50 years. What matters is centuries, because the floods, you saw the '09 flood. The '09 flood went across Cobb Parkway at Butler Creek, went across the street, okay? I mean, that's 35-foot rise. I mean, it's unbelievable, and you have to plan for that. In that '09 flood, I have 2 structures that flood, both of which were built illegally unpermitted.
Wow.
So, I mean, even the worst flood, so proper management, and the city had good insight on that too,
When
making
you
sure.
say they were built illegally, you're talking about before your time
Yes,
here?
yeah, and without permits. I checked, there were no records on them, they were built, So,
Well, part of why Ackworth has so much parkland is because of the floodplain.
sure, yeah. And the floodplains, it serves both, parks, ecology, flood prevention, keeping your houses from being damaged. Well, there's a lot of reasons to preserve the flood areas, but, and of course, we deal with wind and fire, and maybe here's a little tidbit for you and we can wrap up. So a lot of people don't know this area of the country actually is in a seismic zone. The very tip of that seismic zone runs through this city. If you'll expand the map, you'll see that the line, the very outer perimeter edge of that line, runs through the city of Ackworth. Everything from here north is in a seismic zone.
The seismic zone
Runs
through the
literally
center.
through the city of Ackworth. Part of it is in and part of it is out. So the International Code Council said it was my decision as a building official how I wanted to deal with that. He said, because you're split, you can either claim your jurisdiction to be non-seismic, or you can claim it to be seismic, or you can divide it literally where the line is. But the fault line is how do you want to say it, is not necessarily accurate. Does that make any sense? I mean, it's not like, your house shakes across the street, but mine doesn't. I mean, so I just declared the whole town to be part of that seismic zone, and we enforce the seismic codes. There's not much in residential, but there are some in commercial that apply that are done differently here because of the seismic zone. And the New Madrid fault, we're influenced by the Charleston fault, but more actually by the New Madrid fault. And a lot of people don't know that the New Madrid fault is as violent and dangerous as anything San Andreas ever put out. It just only happens in, 200, 300 year cycles. So people don't remember it, But I mean, when it happens, it's bad, So we're actually at the very fringe of that New Madrid fault.
Ackworth might be a very dangerous place.
No, we're at the very edge of it. Plus, we're inspecting to make sure that the structures are built to the seismic design.
Yeah.
So I'm just point that out because people don't understand. People think fire and wind, but you don't think flood and seismic. You typically don't think about that.
So is that where the Piedmont area comes to a close, where the fault line is, and then very different soil to the west?
So that's not exactly what's happening. So the fault, the New Madrid fault, actually the vibrations, when it shakes, the vibrations will extend down this far. So that's just the energy that's produced here is extending down, a couple hundred miles. Really doesn't have anything to do with the soils.
Right.
Now, I mean, soils play into it. If it were all stiff soils or rock, it's going to absorb that and not shake as much as if it's loose, unconsolidated soils. So it plays into how it reacts, but it doesn't have anything to do with
That may take care of your brownfield someday.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, right. They'll just sink. They'll just gone. So,
Well, if you think of any more of these stories, we could always add them later.
yeah, okay, very good. Very good. Well, thank you for the time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, all right.
Very
Bye-bye.
interesting.